Welcome, everyone. Thank you for registering and attending our first ever tinyML Foundation tinyAI forum on predictive maintenance and anomaly detection. So over the course of the next 2.5 hours, we'll be exploring in detail the use cases, key learnings, case studies, and solutions that are available for applying tinyML technology specifically within the use case of predictive maintenance and anomaly detection, one of the prominent use cases that we find for this technology for sensing at the edge. As I said, my name is Chris Rogers. I will be your moderator throughout the process. We'll have an introduction session where myself and our guest speaker, Max Petrenko from AWS, will join me, and we'll set the stage for what is to follow, which is a number of talks from a variety of members of the tinyML Foundation exploring the wealth of experience that these people from academia and industry together have learned on the application of tinyML within this application space. So we'll go through those. Each of those talks will be 10 minutes, and then we'll conclude the overall session with a panel discussion and Q&A. And then finally, a few closing remarks, and that will be it. So stay tuned for what should be a information-packed session over the next 2.5 hours. We should do some level setting. What exactly is meant by predictive maintenance and anomaly detection and the application of tinyML technology? So let me start off with the basics here, and then we'll build from here. So if we look at the evolution of maintenance technology, it has progressed over many years. As you might imagine, the simplest case is the obvious one, which is when something breaks, you fix it, right? That's called reactive maintenance. And it's the most simplistic form. It's really not the application of proactive maintenance at all. It's just when an equipment fault occurs, you identify it, and then you elect to do something about it or take the equipment out of service. Now, as simplistic as that is, there are still applications where that's suitable. If the equipment is non-critical, if it's super low cost, if it's redundant, or it's equipment that's planned for phase out, then maybe you don't apply any of the more advanced techniques in order to prevent those types of failures. So I'd say that overall, as time has gone by, we see more and more of what we would have deemed non-critical or low-cost equipment now being involved in the more advanced approaches to system maintenance, as the costs for microcontrollers and MEMS sensors have reduced the upfront cost. It used to be that only high-value equipment was focused on for things like predictive maintenance, but we see that trickling down more and more into some of the secondary and tertiary systems, and we'll continue to see that trend progress, I'm sure, into lower cost, lower value equipment over time. The next phase is sort of the traditional approach we call preventive maintenance. This is sort of your classic, the old adage of with your car with oil changes, every 3,000 or 5,000 miles, get your oil and filter changed, right? So there's no great insight or intelligence into this other than some upfront analysis on mean time between failure that drives recommendation and general manufacturer prescriptions about a schedule for a periodic maintenance schedule. So there's no closed loop process here. It's it is just sort of a calendar based or usage based approach to providing regular maintenance. These tend to err on the side of over servicing and are used typically in very conservative use cases, and they still persist in things where there are regulatory mandates. Think aviation. And where there's lacking historical data to help drive a more data-driven approach to maintenance. But then we get into the more interesting ones and the ones that are the focus of what we're talking about today, which are starting with predictive maintenance, the use of sensors and algorithms to monitor equipment and advise on appropriate maintenance schedules, and also to predict for useful life. And we'll get more into that in detail on the next slide. But the key drivers for this are advances in sensors and certainly IoT connectivity and the ability to sort of integrate all of these into the types of use cases driven by things like Industry 4.0 and the transformations in manufacturing that it's generating. Obviously, things like financial incentives, increased ROI, efficiency, driving increased capacity, reducing downtime. All of these things are key motivators to providing more intelligence into the process. And then, a term that is used less so, because here's sort of the gray area, is sort of the next phase, which is what's called prescriptive maintenance. Prescriptive maintenance takes this yet a step further, which is the use of AI and ML on top of sensors and algorithms and heuristics to predict fault and failure, and also to advise on appropriate solutions or remedies that could be either curative or to help extend the life of the equipment. These would be particularly useful in things like smart manufacturing, smart grid, transportation, facilities management. So it brings an additional layer. And this is where tinyML starts to factor in, is the sort of convergence between predictive maintenance and prescriptive maintenance to do more than just simple heuristics or thresholds for things like temperature sensors or thresholds for vibration, is to take it to that next level of applying learning technologies in order to have better reactions and prescriptions about how to address these faults. So the three different types of predictive maintenance, real quickly, there's indirect failure prediction. This is taking sensors that are readily available and easy to apply to detect faults that otherwise would be more complex. You can think about like a motor that has bearings. For me to get the direct prediction of a failure, I'd have to disassemble that motor and inspect the bearing and find that I have grit or fault or something that's gone wrong in that bearing. But instead, I don't need to do that. I can typically just put a vibration sensor on there and pick up the frequency that corresponds with the rotating frequency of that device, and becomes therefore a proxy that's highly correlated with the actual fault that I'm looking for. So the cost of those sensors has continued to come down, as the computing that allows for this to be analyzed directly at the endpoint. tinyML is a technology that takes that a step further by bringing AI and machine learning techniques to that. The challenge with this, of course, is that for you to be able to predict these faults, you have to be able to train and test against those fault conditions to build a model that is accurate. And so that relies on having existing historical data in sufficient volume that you can produce an accurate model. These typically tend to be classification problems. In the next box here, we have remaining useful life. This is all about taking those sensors and doing often regression models as opposed to classification to predict a confidence interval for the useful life of the machinery based on extrapolating out the sensor parameters that you see and determining when you're going to have a failure point. The benefits are that we have a much better understanding of when to provide maintenance rather than just a prescriptive calendar-based approach to preventive maintenance. Now we're defining, in the case of the car again, the oil change interval is a function of how dusty the environment is that the car is operating in, the loads on the car, how short the trips are, these types of things that would align to a variable approach to determining events. So the remaining useful life, again, is another useful tool. The limitations for this are that the models tend to have challenges in transferability and scalability because there's context-based information that would impact the results. So I could take the same equipment, again using that motor example. If that motor is located on a concrete pad for some type of factory process, it'll have different frequency response characteristics than one that might be on rubber isolators as its foundation. And there are all kinds of other context-based differences that would change the frequency response and characteristics of the model. So again, like with indirect failure prediction, this is all about having sufficient data in order to build a model. So then the third box, anomaly detection, is sort of a way to address that deficiency of I need a lot of data before I can get a useful model. In the case of anomaly detection, what I'm looking to do is do a baseline model. I may not have every fault or failure condition characterized. It may not even be feasibly possible because this is high value, expensive equipment. I can't spend time performing, basically science experiments to record or capture every one of the various fault conditions that I might be concerned about. So instead, I'm going to establish a baseline of normal behavior. And if I see anything that strays outside of that realm, then flag that as a positive event that I want to react to in some way. As you might imagine, the biggest issue with this is the propensity to false positives, because the model doesn't know what is an interesting event versus just an event that's an anomaly, right? So in the factory setting, again, with that motor on a foundation, if somebody were to drive by nearby with a forklift truck and hit an expansion joint in the concrete floor, that causes a shock. Now I've got a vibration. The machine detects an anomaly, reports it. Someone rushes out to investigate, only to find that there was nothing wrong. And it can be difficult to figure out the cause of false positives if there aren't ways to understand what those triggering events were. So each of these has its pros and cons. And shifting to what types of applications and sensors constitute useful applications for predictive maintenance. Here's just a list of things. I won't go through the whole list here in the interest of time. But yeah, we break them down into sort of audio-based events. These could be from either microphones, or even microphones extend beyond the sort of range of human hearing to include ultrasonic use cases. For things like audio event detection, changing in acoustic patterns of machinery as key clues of change and need for predictive maintenance. Time series sensors. So this is basically anything that would generate a time series waveform. So think accelerometers, gyros, load cells, strain gauges, anything that can be correlated to a predictor of fault or failure that we would wish to monitor. And then vision would be sort of the third major classification of taking camera-based data for doing things like surface defect detection, maybe alignment and positioning monitoring for process control. Corrosion detection in oil and gas pipelines would be another application, or automated optical inspection, take like the circuit boards and the use of cameras to understand if you've got a good solder joints and good placement of components on the device, and whether or not factors in the machine are leading to a drifting failure. So that's a list of the potential applications. In terms of the benefits, so this data comes from Deloitte. It shows sort of what the impact is of doing predictive maintenance and prescriptive maintenance. You see the values here, like for facility downtime, you can reduce that downtime by, in their estimate, between 5 to 15% is on average, with the resulting capacity increases that can come with that. Labor productivity, between 5 and 20% increase. Inventory levels, that you can reduce inventory levels because of more stable supplying capacity. And reliable manufacturing flow. And then finally, the need to invest in new equipment is reduced between 3 to 5% as you're able to extract more useful life out of machines through proper maintenance techniques. So all together, you can see that when applied across to manufacturing process, there's tremendous value to be had from doing these types of things. And that leads to a market where today the consensus of various market research firms is that we're in the roughly the $5 billion market for predictive maintenance today, and that the growth of that market, while these projections vary, they're all very strong in terms of the CAGR growth that we would expect to see over the next 5 to 7 years. So with that, that's a super high level. What I would like to do at this point is to introduce my guest speaker, Max Petrenko. So Max is a principal scientist at AWS for Industries, where he works on strategic product initiatives across multiple industry segments, including automotive, manufacturing, health and life sciences, supply chain, energy, so across many industries. He's had experience from AWS's standpoint in this space. His prior engagements at Amazon include product catalog systems and a moonshot innovation lab tasked with finding novel business directions informed by disruptive technologies. So Max's technology and research orbit includes natural language processing, IoT, neurosymbolic AI, and computational creativity. So welcome, Max. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
So first question to you, we've heard a lot about the benefits and technology readiness of tinyML for predictive maintenance and anomaly applications. Where do you think we are currently in terms of the market adoption for these use cases with tinyML?
That's a good question, Chris. Thanks. Let me first preface by saying that maybe some of the observations I offer are the experience of a big tech company like Amazon when dealing with very large industry customers, very big companies with multi-billion-dollar roadmaps, very long ranging interests. So I think it may not be applicable to, say, smaller or medium-sized businesses, because I think most cases the differences are in the scale of the vision, the specific requirements and expectations about where and how to use the technology. But I think overcoming these challenges would really create very significant transformations for, say, adopting tinyML. So regarding your question, at the high level, I think many large industry customers tend to concentrate all of their attention on several areas of strategic development. They're like very big topics that may include, say, digital or smart manufacturing, software-defined versions of everything, vehicles, parts, machines, assets. There's also a strategic interest in ensuring the stability of the supply chain, which particularly became important during the COVID years. There's also a desire, like a strategic need to maintain the sustainability and the upskilling of the workforce. There is a desire to reduce the time to market, time to value, reduce carbon footprint. So in the context of these big interests, if we look at tinyAI, tinyML, I think the success of the adoption of tinyML and its applications to predictive maintenance would largely be dependent on how and where these large industry customers see them advancing those big strategic industry development areas. I think that's an important direction to keep in mind as we're discussing sort of opportunities for adoption, use cases. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, great. My next question to you is then sort of the opposite of, based on your experience and customer interactions, what do you see as the primary barriers?
I would point out 3 barriers. First, from the technical perspective, when it comes specifically to detecting anomalies, catching defects, I think many large industry customers have extremely high expectations of quality, namely accuracy. They are unwilling to, they consider this their top priority. They're unwilling to compromise on it, and they're eager to ensure this level of accuracy through whatever means necessary, even at the expense of everything else if needed. So I think this is what we're seeing. For example, if ensuring a say 99.9% accuracy of an anomaly detection camera on some factory floor requires introducing humans into multiple steps of that process and purchasing very expensive cloud-ready equipment, so be it. They're very adamant about this. So that's the one barrier. Another barrier I'd point out is maybe it has to do with system level adoption at scale. I think when large industry customers, when they're presented with a tech innovation, tech disruption, it really begins to look attractive to them if there's a very clear path to adopting it at scale and end to end. I think, and it needs to be repeatable to be an item in a long-term multi-year roadmap. I think this is really something that's important to keep in mind. Deploying a machine learning model on, say, MCU-powered cameras on a single factory floor and launching that for hundreds of factory floors across 40 states are qualitatively different realities. I think this is just something that that if we don't articulate that, it might not look very clear. And thirdly, maybe on a similar note, I think there's a challenge of articulating the core value of tinyML and tinyAI through the lens of the customer problem. Big industry customers, they are presented with innovation all the time, and they're, as I was saying earlier, they tend to be focused on these large areas of development. And for the tinyML, I mean, why there's a core question that they need to answer, why they should bother with predictive maintenance and why they should bother with tinyML in the first place. I think this is if predictive maintenance is a means to an end state, what end state is that? What critical metric this improves in their strategic initiatives? Why this improvement is material, how it is material, and how does it justify the cost of replacement and retooling? And I think answers to these questions should really create that story that the customer should hear.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So I think the consequence of this is what we see in these pilots that tend to take some time in order for the larger customers to convince themselves of the accuracy of the models and the ability to then therefore scale up across their entire operations.
Yeah.
So looking ahead then, are you optimistic that these challenges will be overcome by the technology?
I'm generally optimistic. I love tinyML, and I'm very enthusiastic about that. It's a little harder to put our finger on the timeline, though. I think there's sort of an organic, natural way, the path that's already happening of adopting tinyML solutions, prototypes, proof of concept applications, and products with medium and small size companies. So that's great. I do see maybe two ways of accelerating that. I think one would be sort of a leapfrog disruptive thrust of tinyAI capabilities along the lines of what, say, OpenAI has done with transformer architectures. So that would be great. And another way of accelerating that would be a large-scale adoption of tinyAI technologies across one or more industry sectors carried out by a big tech company, say like Amazon. I think this would be a very powerful driver for industries.
Great. Hey, well, we'll look forward to seeing AWS do those large deployments and helping us advance the position of this technology with these large enterprises. Thank
you.
We'll hear more from Max as we get into the Q&A at the end. So thanks for your insights, and stay tuned for more from Max as we get into the Q&A session at the end. So once again, to kind of thank all our sponsors within the tinyML Foundation for making this possible, and to thank all of you who registered and attended Again, thanks everyone for attending, and hope you found this valuable. Take care.